Hi, I'm Tom Eschen, the host of this episode of Power and Politics. We are on location at the U.S. Capitol today, where we spoke with the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, about a lot of different aspects of his job when it comes to airlines, when it comes to the railroad, when it comes to bridges in the Capital Region. A wide-ranging conversation that I think you're going to learn a lot. So make sure to subscribe to our podcast or our YouTube page, CBS6 Albany. The Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, joins us now for this edition of Power and Politics. We appreciate your time, Secretary.
Good to be with you.
We last saw each other back in April of 2023. You came up to Schodack Landing in the Capital Region to announce a big allotment of federal funding for the Castleton-On-Hudson Bridge. And that was for the east side, the east deck over there. Can you give us an update on where that project is right now and what's next?
Yeah, so within days, we're going to see the next chapter of construction on that. That's going to allow the eastbound part to be completed. Between that and the westbound work that's already been done, this is going to extend the life of the bridge by about 50 years. And I saw and heard from so many people during my visit just how important of a connection this is. It's exactly why we worked so hard to get this level of bridge funding in the Biden-Harris infrastructure package to begin with. Believe it or not, there are about 10,000 bridges around the country, large and small, that are getting some kind of funding and support through this program, but the Castleton-on-Hudson is one of the ones that really sticks out with me, both because it's a large project and because I had the chance to actually be there.
Why this bridge?
Well, you know, we aren't able to say yes to every project.
Yeah.
We choose the ones that are going to have the most benefit to the public. That includes a safety benefit and, importantly, an economic benefit. And I don't just mean the good-paying construction jobs working on the repairs, although we're excited about that, but really just making sure that that economic lifeline that the bridge represents is reliable. You know, around the country, we've often seen issues where a bridge has a problem with its condition, maybe not so severe that there's an immediate safety hazard, but severe enough that they have to limit the loads. That can mean that trucks can't travel on that bridge. That becomes part of a supply chain problem. That can even affect things like grocery prices. So the big picture of our economic strength as a country requires us to enhance the physical strength of America's bridges. The ones that present the most compelling case are often the ones that make it to the top of the list. Castleton-on-Hudson was a great example.
Yeah, I remember as a kid driving over that and it being a little bit precarious to my sisters to college at the time. So I think it was a long time coming for even the consumer, you know, the regular person at the end of the day. I wanted to ask you a little down the river, the Hudson River. We did a report a couple weeks ago about the Mario Cuomo Bridge. Just a few years old. It was constructed in 2017. They found some issues already there with some of their anchor pipes. 61 of them are going to have to be reallocated, I guess they can say. They have to be fixed. Such a short time period. I know maybe not specifically, but generally. Does that concern you at all? Is that something you've seen when it comes to that construction process of putting something like that together, a project of that magnitude?
Yeah, that shouldn't happen. And without speaking to or knowing all of the particulars of what's going on with that contract, you would expect some accountability to explain what had happened there, because we're making investments that are designed to last for decades, sometimes for generations. You know, many pieces of infrastructure have been pressed into service for much longer than the lifetime they were designed for. But anything like a major bridge, tunnel, or roadway should be set up to last for years. Now, sometimes a problem emerges. When you have the problem, you've got to deal with it. The most important thing, of course, is to make sure that it is safe and functional for the traveling public.
The municipality, state, whatever might be involved, does that impact at all federal funding in the future when you look at how some contracts are obtained?
Well, certainly we expect that any state or local partner is going to hold their vendors to a high standard, and you know, we'll work with anybody who has concerns about that. But we try to get that addressed up front, having a process where we make sure that there's a strong plan for how that contract will go forward. It does add time sometimes. So one frustration we have is, you know, you'll have an announcement about a bridge or a road. We say, you know, here comes the funding, but it takes a while to get the deal done or to get it signed off for construction. This is part of why, making sure that everything is right on the front end so that you don't run into as many problems on the back end.
As a part of the infrastructure law, money for the electric grid was in there. Was it enough at the time? How much more could be needed?
You know, I think with any piece of American infrastructure, there could always be more, but what we've been able to do is change the trajectory from something that was a problem and getting worse, a backlog growing deeper, to shrinking that backlog and knowing that each passing year, the list of things that have dealt with deferred maintenance or gone without investment is getting shorter instead of longer. And I know that my counterparts over at the Department of Energy, under Secretary Granholm's leadership, have been doing a ton of work to improve the grid. I remember these fights 3 years ago when we were trying to get the infrastructure bill. If some people in Congress saying, well, if it's not a road or a bridge, it's not infrastructure. Now, obviously here at the DOT, we love roads and bridges, and we're glad that that was a huge share of the infrastructure bill. But, pipes, energy grid, broadband now, that's infrastructure too. And that's part of why it was so important to the president and to the administration to include that as part of this package.
That's a factor in energy, climate, when it comes to all that. I believe you said that transportation it could be a climate solution, or something that helps remedy some of what's going on in the climate. I did want to ask you about congestion pricing. I know that you've probably been asked about this before, but New York just saw a backtrack on that from Governor Hochul. Have you made a stance on that just yet? What did you think of that decision to delay that in New York's case?
So it is a state and local decision. We respect that, but we have a role. Our role at the federal side really is to make sure that federal law is being upheld. In this case, that included making sure that there was a very thorough and intensive process of public comment, input, studies. It went into the thousands of pages, and that will inform any further decisions that the governor, the state, or others make. But again, at the federal level, we respect that it's not our call here in Washington. We just need to make sure everything was done right in terms of the federal rules that apply.
I want to get to airlines really quick, Airline Transparency Law. And I know that it's probably been a balancing act of trying to, I think it's urging and forcing airlines to make a decision or a change. This felt like maybe a force of that. Do you think you went too far, considering now it being challenged in court and not getting done as quickly as you might have wanted it to?
Yeah, the airlines are suing to block a rule that we've put into place that requires them to be transparent about their fees. But I don't regret for 1 second the work that we've done to put out that rule, and we stand by it. We're ready to defend it. I also think it's just common sense. I mean, I think a lot of Americans would be surprised that we have to go to the trouble of defending a rule in court that's simply saying that when you're charging people fees, you ought to tell them what those fees are. And that's basically what we've done here. We also have new rules about making sure that you can get fees refunded if you don't get the service. If you pay for Wi-Fi and it doesn't work, you ought to get your money back. And we're making sure that the refunds you get are automatic when your flight is canceled. I think most Americans understand this is common sense, and we're going to keep pushing the airlines hard. Look, I want the airlines to succeed, but I want them to succeed by providing good customer service.
I want to also get to the Railway Safety Act. Do you think politics get in the way of that getting done at the end of the day now, with Congress back here in the last couple of days and a lot of different narratives going on around the progression of that?
I'm continuing to feel a lot of frustration about this. It's been more than a year and a half since the derailment in East Palestine really woke up so many in America to the reality that there is not enough by way of laws and rules to hold these railroad companies accountable. We've done a lot on our end under the existing law. We've increased inspections, we've maintained a high level of enforcement, and we've put out a number of rules designed to keep people and communities safe. But we can only go so far without an act of Congress. And I'm looking for some of those members of Congress who were quick to get on television when they thought they could score political points over what happened, to show their faces now and demand that Capitol Hill act. A year and a half is way too long for communities to be waiting for this kind of legislation. And I can tell you, the moment it passes and the president signs it, we'll be in a position to get to work implementing those rules to make railroading safer, not just for the workers who we depend on to get our goods to where they need to go, but for anybody who grows up in a community like where I grew up that sits along these railroad tracks.
Is that on the Democrats at all, knowing maybe the source of where some of this frustration comes from?
The Democratic votes are there. It moved through committee in the Senate. It's very clear that there are more than enough Democratic votes to support this bill. By the way, it is a bipartisan bill. There are Republican co-sponsors. There just don't seem to be enough yet. I think if it's called for a vote, it will require a lot of Republicans to go on the record who have said that they care about rail safety, but still haven't said how they're going to vote on this bill.
One more question, and it's more of a conceptual question, if you will. I've watched a lot of your interviews. You speak to a lot of different outlets. You speak a lot on the basis of fact, of data, of polling, statistics. How do you get Americans to go along with that? Because it feels like right now there's a lot of perceptions about different topics. You could say the border. You could say the economy. For one reason or another, I mean, crime even as well. You go on these networks and give people stats about them, but people don't necessarily believe that. How do you change, I guess, that perception and make it reality? Because right now it feels like half of the country doesn't necessarily believe some of the things that you're saying.
Well, that's part of why I'm going out there trying to present some of the things that I think some voters or audiences or citizens don't always hear about. I think it's really important to talk about the actual results, not just the things that grab attention in the latest online controversy of the day, but the actual reality. Now, that doesn't mean everybody wants to sit around and talk about statistics, but I think a lot of it's more about stories. For example, the stories of places like where I grew up in the industrial Midwest, where they told us when I was a kid that we were done manufacturing things. Those union jobs were never coming back. And now when I go there, I see factories rising out of the ground at a level that we haven't seen since the John F. Kennedy administration. And a lot of it is for things like EV components, which is why it's so important that we maintain a policy of developing a made in America electric vehicle revolution to create jobs just as we've created jobs for the last 100 years in traditional automaking. Whether we're talking about that, whether we're talking about roads and bridges, whether we're talking about the jobs that have been created in construction and building trades, I don't know that it's ever going to be something that everybody's excited the way I am to geek out over the statistics on. I think it's the fact that lives change when we fix the road, improve the bridge, create the job, renew the industry. Those are the stories we need to be telling. They don't tell themselves. That's why I'm out on the road all the time trying to draw attention to them.
Do you think it should be just up to you, though? Do you think a culture around this, it should change a bit in terms of this message?
Sometimes...
Because you're good at it. I think people that say, well, wow, he's so well-spoken, he's very eloquent, and he does have that message, but unfortunately, you're not the only one, I guess, out there.
I mean, no, there's a lot of voices out there that will go straight into the negativity, right? They will tear things down, and when you have a good result, if it wasn't perfect, if crime falls by 30%, you're not going to see 30% fewer news stories about crime. People are going to focus on what's still happening and the work that remains to be done. Fair enough. But we got to talk about what's working so that we can double down on what's working and throw out what's not working.
Secretary, we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Hit the subscribe button right now so you can stay up to date on these news-making conversations about the issues impacting New Yorkers the most: power and politics.